Making it rain.
Let me know if you get the YouTube notification.
Yeah, I'll jump over there.
All right, we got people jumping in already. LJ.
Because they heard Taylor was going to be on the episode. They're like, oh, we got to check this
how
out.
You doing, buddy? Oh, my goodness. Chris Resendez showing up to the show.
The Great White North is live.
He doesn't even know that I'm Canadian. Yo.
He didn't hear about that.
Average Scrub over on YouTube. Welcome to the...
Yep. YouTube.
Oh, man. Come on now. Now it's telling me that I can't find my chats over there.
Oh, I'm on you. I jumped on the YouTube chat.
Make sure I know if this isn't going to show us. Ryan, Kevin, welcome. We have, yeah, I can see it. Cool. That's good. It's showing up. It was being a pain. It's telling me it wouldn't, so that's good. I got to keep an eye on Twitch, too, for our boy, Titty Boy McGee, or whatever his name is.
Oh, Titty Boy McGee. The man, the myth.
I felt bad because I missed them chats the last time, and I feel like he feels like his dad just left him hanging.
Left him. Just a terrible father.
The Average Scrub said, let's talk some fantasy, baby. 2-0. What up, Kevin?
Whoa, maybe he needs to be up on this show. You need to get up on this action.
I've had like it's a weird start. Like in leagues where I never expected to be winning, I'm 2-0, and in my leagues where I expected to be winning, I'm either 0-2 or 1-1. It's like ass backwards.
Yeah, I should say not big. Not the 96 teamer, but the Roto Heat Superflex, where I made a bunch of moves, traded everything I had to try to make. Yeah, I'm 1-1. I'm like, this sucks.
You hate me so bad for Minshew, don't you?
Well, it's made me getting another quarterback quite painful, you know. Like, all right. So I go to.
No, go ahead.
What's that? I was just saying, I keep going to what's his name, Ladybugs. I can't think of his name right now, but I keep going to him. He's like, oh, I need stuff in return. I was like, well, I'm coming to you because all mine keep dying. So, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start us up so we can get going and we can talk all this BS on the show. Welcome back to the HeatSeekers Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Butts, and tonight I've got my boy Brad Menendez with me, and I've got my boy Taylor Cornell with me, and we are going to talk about strategies depending on where you are record-wise through 2 weeks. It's not the end-all, be-all of where you're going to end up at the end of the season, but you really have to start prepping for what type of moves you're going to need to make if you can't pull yourself out of the winless column in week 3, or if you want to set yourself up on a win now team in the future. Now it's time that you got to start kind of putting those chess pieces, like thinking like chess and thinking ahead of everybody else. What can I do to set myself apart? So that's what we're going to talk about today. But Taylor, it's been a minute since you've been on the show. How you been, buddy?
Doing all right. I think I mentioned on our Facebook page I've got 6 teams that are combined 2-10 right now, with one of the leagues that's free accounting for one of my wins, so that hardly counts. So it's been a rough start to the season. I felt pretty good going into the season, as everyone does, but hoping to turn it around, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's always rough when you start out, good where you don't care if you're good, and bad where you want to be good. It can be really frustrating, which this season I think Brad can contest. As you've already said, it's been very, very frustrating at the beginning of this year. There's a lot of players that are popping that we didn't really expect to pop. especially early with rookie wide receivers. And then we've got a lot of guys that we expected to come out big, and they've just kind of fallen flat. Like, and you're a Bengals fan, so you've got like both sides of it. With John Ross doing much better, wide receiver 1 overall right now, and then Joe Mixon, who I mean he might not even have positive points right now. Been real slow to start. So we've seen that all over the league though, and it's frustrating. But we're here to help. We're here to talk about like what we would do if we were 2-0 or if we were 0-2. So. Brad, why don't you lead us into the news and notes that we've got to get into first?
All right, so we got a couple of injuries. If you guys didn't catch our Sunday night recap, jump over to any of your major podcasting platforms. Rick and I do a Sunday night up, waiver wire pickups, injuries, stuff like that. So we've had 2 injuries this week that we have more information on. So the firstly, because I'm a huge David Njoku fan, he first went into the concussion protocol, and now they've released he's got a broken wrist, and he's getting opinions, and he may need surgery, and it's just brutal because he wasn't playing terribly, and he looked like Baker was targeting him more this year and having more trust in him. So that's kind of a bad injury. What do you guys make of Cleveland's tight end situation after Njoku? I mean, they basically have retreads. They got Ricky Seals-Jones and Demetrius Harris. Just kind of a lot of meh. What Taylor? What do you think about the bind in Njoku?
Yeah, I mean, I like Harris from an athletic profile. Hard to say whether his lack of production in Kansas City was just a lack of opportunity. I picked him up in one of the tight end premium leagues I'm in just as a flyer. Who knows, maybe. But in the Cleveland offense, there's just, I don't want to use the cliche, mouths to feed, because we've seen prolific offenses be able to sustain lots of fantasy relevance like in Kansas City. But there really is. Baker's struggled a little bit to begin the season. And right now it's looking like you got Beckham with Landry as a distant second, and none of the other pass catchers have really done much for us yet. So I'm not super excited about plugging anyone into my lineup. I'm not big on Seals-Jones, but it wouldn't hurt, I guess, to pick him up as a flyer if you need some tight end depth. But I don't know, not expecting a whole lot out of that position group in Njoku's absence.
Yeah, for sure. Rick, what do you
Yeah, well, it was already hard to trust Njoku, and I feel the same way Taylor feels about Harris. Like, he has a great athletic profile. He has shown well when given an opportunity. No big games or anything, but he'll just like the other night, he made catches when given the opportunity. So if he's starting, then he's definitely worth a look. But I think we've got to give it a week or two to see if they're even going to utilize him as much as Njoku. And we know that sometimes Njoku was touchdown reliant with that offense and with the weapons that are there. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic, but I'm not putting a lot of stock into that situation.
Yeah, I look elsewhere at least for the time being until we know what happens. The other injury of note is more of a surprise. I hadn't really seen anything over the weekend. From last Thursday, Jameis Winston has a foot injury, so he's been seen with a walking boot, but he's also been practicing. So it doesn't seem like it's super serious because he's expected to play. And because in week 1, I think people are starting to think that maybe there's a little hope. I've never been a huge Jameis fan, but that's just me personally. Bruce Arians can fix anybody. I'm just not sure Jameis is anybody. So Taylor, how do you feel about Winston moving forward? And could a foot injury make it anybody? What say you, sir?
Yeah, I can't say I'm super excited about the backup quarterback situation there either. Should Winston miss any time, but Winston's a tough guy to gauge this season. I wouldn't have minded having him as a QB2, thinking he was going to compile a lot of random yards, and sure, he'll have some turnovers, but you'll live with it. But instead, the rough start in a super flex startup this summer, I had the choice between Cousins and Winston and thought I was playing it safe going with Kirk Cousins, and that hasn't played out well for me either. But yeah, I mean, I guess if there's something to the foot injury that's been limiting and impacting his throwing a little bit, healing up might see some improvement. But I think he's shown his track record is he's a turnover machine. And I mean, I would think that if they have to, if he misses any time, I wouldn't be too concerned about Evans or Godwin, just because those guys are such beasts that they're going to get fed the ball. And I don't think it'll really impact them for better or worse, really.
Yeah, and definitely Evans is definitely going to bounce back. I've had a lot of guys message me in the last few days asking about Evans, and people, just a public service announcement. Evans is their best receiver. I know Godwin's getting a lot of love, but Evans is their guy. Like, he can't stay down for long. But that's just me saying that. So if anybody listens to this, don't sell Evans cheap. Rick, what do you think about? Well, I know what you think about him, but feel free.
Right. I've never been a Winston fan, but the same as Taylor said, I actually got him in a league fairly cheap in an auction draft, super flex, and I was feeling good about it as well. And now I don't know who the hell I'm going to start week to week in either of my quarterback spots. So, it can be injury, it can be whatever. He's just never been a good decision maker. And, I have a lot of experience with that because Jay Cutler was kind of the same way in Chicago, being a Bears fan. Like, has the arm talent, can, get some yards on the ground, but when push comes to shove and you need a big throw, he'll make a bad decision. And it hurts the team. But it's weird to me because we've literally seen no production out of two of the guys that everybody was high on, and O.J. Howard and Mike Evans. And I just think that if this doesn't turn around quick, then this is the last year we're going to see Winston as the starter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Absolutely. Well, and there was a report. Well, I can't say a report. Bruce Arians said this week that O.J. Howard is going to see balls come his way. I'm assuming that's a good sign. So far we've not seen what we wanted to out of O.J. Howard, but you O.J. Howard fans, definitely hold on to him as well. Him and Evans should start seeing something here because they're both super talented. So those are the two major injuries of note. Next, I want to hit news, but we got to hit it quick so we can talk about the reason we're talking tonight. So obviously the big news that we've talked about, Daniel Jones named starter, a little sooner than people expected, but it was going to happen. Eli Manning's just hot garbage at this point in his fantasy career. So how do you guys feel about Daniel Jones being named the starter? I know that we posted a brief little breakdown on YouTube the other day to help people get ready for it, but Taylor, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the boat of, there's a lot of uncertainty there. He looked season, but so did my man Chad Kelly, and he got cut today. So take the preseason with the. He obviously came into the league with a lot of questions of had he had enough college production to warrant that high of a draft pick, and is he going to be any good? Preseason, he kind of quieted some of the haters for a little bit. Regular season's a completely different story, but I'm firmly in the boat that he can't quite be as bad as Eli Manning, I wouldn't think, just because Eli was, at the point of his career, was just playing it super safe with all of his passes, low yards per attempt. I'm excited to see a rookie that gets out there that hopefully they let him push the ball down the field a little bit. I know they kind of lack playmakers there in the receiving core, but they'll get Golden Tate back. They'll get Sterling Shepard's getting healthy and things like that. So they'll have some weapons there. Evan Ingram hopefully can help stretch the field. I'm just hopeful that it makes some of those guys a little more fantasy relevant than they have been. Whether they become fantasy stars, probably not. But I'm just interested to see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. And Jones is. We saw in the preseason. Now, obviously, it's just preseason, but he looks good throwing the ball. He threw some really nice deep passes and things that Eli could have done when he was a younger guy, but certainly not been doing recently. Rick, how do you feel about Daniel Jones moving forward?
Every piece of the Giants offense that I owned, I am happier to own today than I did last week at this time. There is no, I've said it for 3 years now, that it didn't matter who they started. Geno Smith would have been better than Eli when he replaced him. And for fantasy purposes, at least. We're talking about one of the best tight ends in the league. We're talking about maybe the best running back in the league that were hurt by that low, yards per target, because people knew they didn't have to worry about wide receivers downfield. They just didn't have to. All they had to do was cover the intermediate and short part of the field, and that makes it harder. And I don't know how the hell Saquon Barkley's averaging like 8 yards per carry right now through 2 games with Eli at quarterback. Like, there was no fear about the passing game, at least the long passing game. So, watching Jones' film, he didn't have a lot, but he seemed to make good decisions. And, we just got done talking about, another quarterback that doesn't make those good decisions. So if he can make those and be accurate, I think your Evan Ingram shares, you're going to love them. I think it's going to help Saquon get more space. And if you get that boy in space, there ain't nobody stopping him. So I'm excited for it. It's about time. It took long enough. I'm just glad that, what they said before the season about how they hope they just win and they don't have to worry about a quarterback controversy. Yeah. It didn't even last 3 weeks. So I love it. So if you have Golden Tate, if you have Shepard, if you have Ingram, if you have Barkley, you should be ecstatic right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's huge. Okay, so a couple of them, and one Taylor mentioned. The Colts waived quarterback Chad Kelly. I know that some people in the community were super excited about Chad Kelly long term. I was never a huge fan. And then the Raiders traded for Trevor Davis, wide receiver from Green Bay. So that was reported this afternoon. Is there anything you guys want to say about either of those two? I'll start with you, Taylor.
I'm heartbroken about Swag Kelly. I'm a big fan. I know it was all preseason numbers, but I thought he showed that he not necessarily would thrive in the NFL from what we saw, but I was excited to see him maybe get an opportunity, especially as some of those chips started to fall with Luck retiring. But then obviously Brissett signed the extension. I mean, for Kelly, I'm just hoping he ends up in a decent situation. I mean, there's a lot of quarterback injuries right now, obviously. So there are a number of places he could go and be the second on the depth chart as opposed to the third, but nothing fantasy relevant for him.
When we're talking about Kelly, there are a lot of opportunities for him to end up a starter this year, which is weird because right now we're kind of looking at it like, well, what quarterbacks are actually healthy? We could probably name fewer of those than that are injured. And then we talk about a couple other guys that are not playing well. I could see him end up as a backup in Oakland, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville could take a look at him. Pittsburgh could take a look at him. If the Giants are going to trade Eli, which I think they'll at least attempt to do, they can bring him in. So there's a route for him to get somewhere and then look at Luke Falk was sitting on the sideline like looking for a job a week ago, and then he was starter on Monday night. So it wouldn't be crazy for me. Jets could look at him. Who knows? So there's
for sure.
I've never seen this many quarterback injuries. This 2 weeks into the season, it's crazy.
It's intense.
It makes super flex leagues like really interesting right now. Like I'm literally dropping 7% of a budget on Luke Falk. Like I would have, if you told me 2 weeks ago I would do that, I would have called you nuts.
Yeah, I dropped 25% I don't even know his name. Cam's back up that might start on in his absence. Davis or something like that is his last name. I don't know. Ryan
When
Davis. I don't know.
Foles went down, I was in a league with the Roto Heat Team League, and I knew Brad loved Minshew after he went in that first week. So Ray Fryer, another Roto Heat member, is my co-owner in that league, and I said, dude, we're dropping 100% on him. We're dropping 100% on him because I don't know what else. I also didn't know that Breeze and Roethlisberger were going to go down the very next week and potentially have options there. But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, and it is, but there's, they're giving some of these young guys a chance. And, like, I like Minshew. I like Mason Rudolph. I mean, obviously, Teddy Bridgewater's got value. Like, we're getting to see some action for some of these guys that were fringe starters or should have been. I'm excited about it. It makes it more challenging, But, I mean, if Kelly goes anywhere, I mean, I would hate for him to go to Jacksonville because then you've got Swag Kelly and the guy that warms up in only a jockstrap. I mean, like Gardner Minshew's like my spirit animal. That dude just cracks me up. Like that fourth quarter drive against Houston. I mean, that showed what the kid could do when he gets it all together. I mean, he's smart with the football. He's not the most athletic. He looks everybody's dad, but he's smart with the ball and he is a leader. So I'm excited about him. In our 96er league, I dropped like everything. I was moving mountains to get that kid.
I love how it turned from Chad Kelly and Trevor Davis into the Gardner Minshew sales pitch. But I did want to mention Trevor Davis. This guy, he never really got an opportunity. He was a kick returner in Green Bay, but there's a lot of targets to be had in Oakland and not a lot of talent for him to be competing with there. So I think he's definitely worth a look if he's on your waiver wire right now.
Absolutely. What about you, Taylor? How do you feel about Trevor Davis?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a deep stash. I think there's targets there. Obviously, not a lot of competition, but I don't know that Carr's going to be airing it out necessarily 50 times a game. I know he's going to rely on Waller, and Tyrell Williams is emerging. He's always got Jalen Richard as his safety valve there. I don't think the competition ahead of Trevor Davis. I don't think ahead of him he's got Ryan Grant, J.J. Nelson. These guys have been in the league for a while and have always been wide receiver 3, 4, 5s. So if he's able to flash a little bit, I think he had a pretty good preseason. Potentially get up there, and who knows, injury here or there, and he's up into wide receiver 3 territory for the Raiders. So something to keep an eye on for sure.
You missed Hunter Renfrow. The man, bad. The myth, the Renfrow.
My bad.
Yeah, I mean, Davis has a lot of opportunity. I mean, Ryan Grant's bounced around the league because he's just not that good. Decent receiver, but, a depth guy. I mean, so he's definitely got opportunity in the athletic.
Ryan Grant is like Dante Moncrief light. Like, I was hype on him when he went to Indianapolis last year, and that worked out real well. If he can't be relevant with Andrew Luck, then I don't.
In Luck's best year.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, so
it's a mess in Oakland.
It is, but it'll get better. I mean, that team. I'm surprised how well that team's played through 2 weeks. I mean, I know Kansas City demolished them, but they didn't look bad.
Jacobs, Waller,
Terrell
Williams, like when you go down at each level, talking about it that way, like I like that working out for them, but I was a little worried, and not to go down a different street, but I didn't like that they didn't really utilize Jacobs in the passing game when they were down against the Chiefs. It seems kind of alarming to me that they didn't utilize him at all.
Yeah, that was a bit strange. Yeah, I never know what to make of what John Gruden's head's going in John Gruden's head. Okay, so we got 2 last pieces of news. And the Drew Brees isn't news. So we know he's going to be out 6 weeks, but they opted not to put him on IR. So he clogs up a roster spot. So that obviously is a positive. expect him back in 6 weeks. He's probably only going to be playing for a good 6 or so weeks. And then Antonio Brown is not getting charged for either of the accounts that happened in 2017 is what I'm seeing reported today. So be that as it may, that still means the NFL could do whatever the NFL does, but legally he's not getting charged, at least today. So how does that make you guys feel? Taylor, how does it make you feel about your Antonio Brown shares? Because I know that you've got them everywhere, right?
I've actually tried to buy him every time he's popped up in the news, and I haven't been able to. The most recent kind of had me thankful I didn't. If anything, the guy should be thrown face. Unforgivable.
I figured that's why you tried to trade for him. You're like,
unforgivable. I don't know what kind of sentence that carries with it, but
did you say pink eye? Because I was getting ready. I was getting ready to say pink eye.
As long as they don't put him in solitary confinement, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's good for owners of Antonio Brown. It might open another sell window for him to get out from underneath of him. Something we might touch on a little bit later when we get on the, if you're a team that hasn't won yet and you don't think that Antonio Brown fits into your plans long-term dynasty-wise, this could open an opportunity to trade him. I think with all the questions around him, no one was really wanting to acquire him too much. So I don't know. I don't own him anywhere. I think it's going to make it harder for me to try to get him again if no one was going to trade him to me before. I anticipate him jumping right back into the Patriots' plans and probably leading them to a Super Bowl or something stupid.
Stupid for sure. I mean, this whole situation has been weird since the beginning. It's been real hard for me to make a decision on what I believe and what I don't believe, because he's such a wacko, and it's weird for me when somebody's trying to get you to settle for $2 million out of court, but then sues you for $75,000 because there's a slight discrepancy there, which screams like just money. But yeah, I could not believe that there was video of him farting in the face of the doctor. That just took it over the edge for me. No, I don't want to make light of any of the situations. Obviously, he didn't pay his doctor bill, so he's being sued for $12,000 there. And then he, walked up to the artist that he hired to do a nude painting of him, which is, weird to begin with a cloth. I mean, he covered himself up, so I don't know what, I don't know. It seems like at least he covered himself up, whether it was a small cloth or a towel. I don't know. It's just all weird. It's so weird. He's getting a nude painting. It's his trainer with all this stuff. It's farting in a doctor's face. It's a blonde mustache. It's everything but football right now, and it's just weird. It's weird.
Yeah. Not to take it too far off on the tangent, but did you guys read that Sports Illustrated article that touched on all of the bizarre people he's hired to do various things, like a chef he had cooked for the Pro Bowl players down when it was in Miami or whatever, and then he had strippers there with his kids, and it was just super bizarre. This whole story, there's painting. He didn't pay the chef like random things for him, and then just doesn't pay them and then cuts them off. It's just dude, you have so much money and you owe someone $10,000. It's that's a one catch for you.
How are you being sued for $12,000 when you are making $40 million?
So I don't know, just
or whatever the hell this deal is, but yeah, it's weird.
The next news story is going to be Antonio Brown stole money from a clown, and just it doesn't make any sense to me why he keeps doing what
Antonio Brown
he's doing.
Steals money from a clown dressed like Antonio Brown.
It's just he hired a clown to go see It 2 with him or something, and they stiffed him. What are you doing, Antonio? So I obviously like Rick said, we don't make light of it, but the thing that I struggle with is there's got to be something going on with this dude. There's got to be something in his head. But what it is ruining is it's ruining my Josh Gordon shares. I started Josh Gordon last week, and Antonio stole everything. My Josh Gordon did
long-term, it's going to help Josh Gordon. Long-term, it's going to help Josh Gordon. But when you're playing the Dolphins...
I can't guarantee he'll be out there in a few weeks.
Well, that has... we can't figure that out. Just like injuries, Brad, we just got to forget about it until it happens. But when you're playing the Dolphins, you don't have to throw very much. So, nobody's going to see the targets they normally see. So, we better get into the meat of this.
So that's all the news and notes and injuries and everything. So take it away, Rick. Let's move along to the meat of the show.
So do we want to start on the good end or do we want to start on the bad end? We should probably end on a high note, right? So for the 2-0 guys, we should probably end there. So we should probably start with 0-2. All right. So here's the scenario. You're 2 weeks into your NFL season. You may have been tanking the right way. You've traded for draft picks and now you're 0-2. Or you may have been planning to compete for a championship and everything goes wrong and you're 0-2. So there's a couple different scenarios. There's also redraft and dynasty, and we're going to talk a little bit about both of them on what you should be doing right now if you're 0-2. I think the first step for me is that I would look at my roster and I would look at the opposing teams and look at their rosters and then make the decision, is my team really good enough to compete? And you can't necessarily look at what has happened so far because a lot of weird stuff has happened so far. But you got to look and say, okay, well, I thought these guys were going to be good this year. Am I giving up? Do I not think Joe Mixon's good? Do I think that Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are going to see more targets because Minnesota just hasn't thrown very much yet? C.J. Anderson just got released. Is Kerryon Johnson going to get more touches? So I think that's the first step for me is to figure out, am I supposed to be 2-0 or 0-2, or is this just basically bad luck at the beginning of the season? What about you, Taylor? What's your first step in that scenario?
Yeah, if I'm thinking dynasty first and I'm looking at my roster, kind of what you were saying, the first thing is I think you got to be realistic with your team. Looking at, is this a team that realistically can compete for a championship this year? The other thing is not overreacting to certain things. So looking through your roster, do you have a bunch of guys like the Mixons that we've talked about that are underachieving, but we know have the talent, we know are going to continue to get the touches, barring injury, knock on wood. You have guys that are towards the tail end of their career and are kind of falling off a cliff that we don't really see them recovering. Kind of really assessing your team and looking at getting a real good idea of what your actual roster is, so then you can plot out what your next moves are. Draft, you got to be a lot more aggressive because you're really, instead of looking at a 1, 2, 3, 4-year window, you're looking at 12, 13, 14 regular get to the playoffs. So in that case, if 0-2, I'm looking at who are some guys I can buy low on that'll help me. AJ Green might be back in 2 to 3 weeks. Is that somebody that helps me get a season? Because I think in redraft, you can string together 4, 5, 6 games in a row that you win and sneak into the playoffs, and then anything happens. So it's a little bit different mindset. I'd be a little more aggressive in redraft. Probably there's no reason to punt on the season, obviously, 2 games in. Dynasty, I'm being a little more realistic and trying to think big picture as to, am I underachieving and I need to, just kind of stand pat, or do I just not have good enough players and I need to either blow it up or try to attain better players? So,
Brad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part you have to take into account is, what did you do this off? So, in a couple of my leagues, as it got closer to the season and as we saw kind of how things shook out on rosters and, and some of the rookies and things like that, I started to get a little excited about a couple of my teams. So, I went like a rock star at a strip club, and I made it rain and sold all my draft picks. So 2 weeks in, my teams that I'm trying to win now on are 1-1, and I'm like, oh crap, what did I just do?
What? Wait,
so I think
you're worried about 1-1. We're talking about 0-2 here. 1-1 ain't
well,
the...
well, But 1-1, and in both situations, 1-1 was one team was good and I lost to them, and one team was crappy and I beat them. So it's like 1-1. I mean, I still I feel like 0-2 because I expected to just win it all. So
imagine being actually 0-2.
Right.
I love.
So that's.
My co-host is so good at fantasy that he has to imagine his teams that win games as over.
That's how he
I
motivates his
play like I'm not winning, so that I win.
Motivate the players, make them think they lost the game.
So
I like
my next question was, you've looked at your 0-2 squad or your 3-0 squad in Brad's case, and you're like, oh shit, I'm not winning like I thought I was going to. Who are some players that you are going to target? And let's go with redraft first. Who are you going to target to help dig you out of that hole? Taylor. Oh, Brad, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Brad.
No, we'll go to Taylor, obviously. No, I just wanted to throw out a big one for me is like wide receivers that are underperforming. Mike Evans, the Minnesota receivers. Like those are guys that if you're in redraft, people might be getting nervous about that you might be able to, let's say you drafted running back heavy, maybe you could shoot a running back, a receiver and something else, or like a receiver and a playable running back or something like that.
Would you say player names?
That was just what I wanted. Oh, well.
Tell us who you're targeting.
I'm thinking. Yeah, the guys I'm thinking are Mike Evans, Adam Thielen, Stefan Diggs. Like those are three guys that I've sent offers out in redrafts for this week, trying to see if the owners are willing to trade. So those are three guys that I've been thinking about. Taylor, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse here with some of the names. Like Mixon is one that if I have Mixon on one of my, so I'm holding firm there, hoping he is able to find some daylight. But I mentioned AJ Green. I was talking with a friend earlier today who's 0-2 in his redraft league. And he was asking about Green. And I think the key with those guys is if you're looking at guys like maybe even Tyreek Hill, who's injured, he's burning a roster spot on somebody's redraft roster right now, kind of trying to target their acquiring them maybe 2 weeks before they come back. Because obviously as the noise gets louder, the closer they get back. And it's like, oh, AJ Green's now playing on Sunday. It's too late. That the owners already held them for 4 weeks. They're not going to now just give them to you. So trying to be strategic in those ways. I think Tyreek Hill's probably got a few more weeks left. So if you are able to get 1 or 2 wins over the next couple of weeks and you're breaking even at 2-2 and you're able to get Tyreek Hill and hold him for a couple more weeks till he's healthy, he could help you down the stretch run. I think it's all about buying low. So we've had plenty of the stars that Brad mentioned that are underperforming, and then looking at guys that have also been injured and trying to discount.
Yep, I agree with all those names. There's a couple more. Actually, in a league where I can't remember what my record is in that league, but O.J. Howard at tight end was one that I just got. For Taysom Hill in a second, I got OJ in a fourth, which I thought was awesome because this all that quarterback stuff we talked about earlier. And then a guy, especially in Dynasty right now, that I think is a great buy, and people are going to be like, duh, Rick thinks that Corey Davis is a good buy, but he's had 2 kind of bad matchups to start the season. And obviously they don't throw a shit ton in Tennessee, but people are I don't think they're ever going to be lower on him than they are right now. So the cost of acquisition shouldn't be too high. I think that there are some other running backs right now, the Joe Mixons, Fournette, Todd Gurley even. Depending on where you're at, are guys that I think are at their low for the season and could help you get out of that 0-2 funk and then help you potentially win championships.
And I think some of the Kenyon Drake might be a guy that you could get him super cheap. You would hope he does something in Miami more than what he's done. But if he gets traded and all of a sudden his value skyrockets, you want to get him while he's cheap. Another guys, I don't know exactly how much longer Tevin Coleman will be out, but he would be one as an injured running back that I would maybe look at. Everybody's all hyped up with Breida, who's going to maintain a role, but everyone's hyped up about Mostert right now, who is really just spot starting until Tevin's back. So he'd be someone that if you don't have a lot of trade pieces, I'd go get Tevin Coleman and see what he can do for you at the end of the redraft season here.
My boy Raheem, he's going to carve himself out a role. All that dude has done is produce every opportunity he's got, except for when he broke his arm last year. I really like him to carve out a role even when the other two guys are back. They'll use three backs. They don't care. Obviously, Jeff Wilson, Shanahan said that he's probably going to be their goal line back with Coleman out. So you've got all three of those guys in there. But when they rush for over 200 yards and catch passes, you know what? Mostert had 6 catches last week or something for 68 yards, and they'll all catch the ball a little bit. It's just, I don't know if you want to own any of the pass catchers in that offense. But, yeah, so let's flip the other way. Let's say that you look at your roster in Dynasty, and you're like, I shouldn't be competing. There's a reason why I'm 0-2. Which players are you like first come to mind that like I need to sell these guys?
I mean, I would say if I'm at the running back position, if I had like Devontae Freeman, I would. The tough thing is I would be hoping I'd be waiting until some of these guys have like a decent game before I ship them off, so I get some value from them. But just looking at the running back position, anybody that's 27, 28, 29 aren't probably going to be pieces I want to build around. So moving off of guys like Devontae Freeman, wide receiver. I mean, I can't think of a better time to sell Larry Fitzgerald if you still had him. I sold him 3 years ago because I was convinced he was going to be retiring soon, and somehow he's guard games in 2019. But he's not going to be a piece that necessarily helps you build for the future, but he's going to help someone who's trying to contend right now. So he's an obvious name. He's been like my dynasty sell for, like I said, 3 years. But I mean, at some point he's got to retire. So
or at least just fall off. Like, how can he be this productive?
I don't want to be left holding the bag when he decides to hang it up. So
Jeremy Goldie's telling me that I need to sell him Aaron Jones. He's been trying to get him from me, but I've got 2 of the guys that we just talked about with Mixon and Fournette on my team, so I can't really get rid of Jones right now because I don't know what I'm getting from any of them from week to week right now. On a team where I'm 0-2, but should have a good team. But Brad.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, typically older, valuable guys. So, if you're running back 27, 28, if you're a wide receiver, between 28 and 30, like those are the guys that I start thinking about selling. So obviously, Adam Thielen would be in that group. Taylor mentioned Devonta Freeman. I would consider selling, anything from San Francisco because those are kind of hot right now, but probably not going to be long-term valuable for me.
Alshon Jeffrey might be one that, again, he's plummeting, but if he can get back healthy and Wentz starts getting him some targets, he'd be one I'd be trying to sell.
I think Alshon is a guy that works on both sides. If you're a team that you think should be competing, he could be a guy that you could buy pretty cheap to help you when he comes back. The same with Deshaun Jackson. Those are another couple guys that you could really literally go either way with them. I'm going to go a little bit different than you guys went because, I mean, obviously, in Dynasty, selling older assets is always a good idea if you're not competing. But what about some of these guys like Marquise Brown, DJ Shark, even Mecole and Demarcus Robinson after their big weeks? If you're looking and you want to get some first-round picks, even late first-round picks, these are guys that would have cost you a second or third round pick a few weeks ago, and even Shark, maybe worse than that. If you don't really believe in them, they're a great guy to try to flip for draft capital. In my opinion, you can keep the youth with the draft.
John Ross.
If John Ross, same way.
Yeah.
If you're not a true believer in their talent, they're great assets because people will pay more because they're younger. But if you're not a believer and you think that you can get somebody that you like more in that 2020 class, or even 2021, if you're willing to wait the extra year, I think those are great guys that you can flip right now, and really, help keep that youth, but maybe get guys that you're more comfortable with personally. But it's obviously a personal matter.
Yeah.
If you like those guys, then you're not going to want to flip them.
Yeah, and I think if you, like me, for example, I had A.J. Brown rated super high coming out of Ole Miss. If he's somebody that's obviously not performing quite like Marquise Brown is, but you can flip Marquise Brown for A.J. Brown plus, that'd be a move I'd be looking to make. But it's all about, like you said, the players that you value and you think are more sustainable, or that you just think their skill set is something that's going to last longer. You got to make those decisions, but that's a great point. You might be able to take somebody that's young and get someone you like better that's just as young.
Brad, do you have any other thoughts here?
No, you guys nailed it. I mean, that's all good information, so I'll leave it at that.
I'm glad you're here. We're gonna skip. We're gonna skip 1-1.
How dare you?
We're gonna skip the 1-1 teams because we don't know what they are. Brad has definitely confused us.
They're falling apart is what they are.
You monster. The 1-1 teams.
Okay, so when we get to 2-0 and we're looking at our 2-0 teams, I think it's really the same thing as when we're 0-2. Like, should we really be 2-0? Or did, like one of my teams, I literally played the two lowest scoring teams in the league the first 2 weeks. So do I really have a good team, or do I just happen to be 2-0? I could still end up being the worst team in the league after starting 2-0 in that one.
Yep.
So I think, once again, you really have to be honest with yourself. And obviously when you're 2-0, if you're not like explicitly trying to gain draft capital by losing, obviously you can't just sit your guys. If you're in a league where you can just sit your roster and not starting players, then you should probably look for a different league. But if you really want to be losing because you want a high draft pick next year and you don't really have the talent, but you're just you're accidentally winning right now, it's the same thing as if you're 0-2 and you should be. You need to start selling those assets, and in that case, you probably need to do it sooner before you accidentally win more games and lose draft capital. Thoughts on that, Brad?
Yeah. I mean, it's important to be honest about your team. I see Era Justice just joined the chat, and him and I are in a league together where his team is stacked. Like, he's got the best and the deepest roster. I mean, every position, he's got solid startable players that just haven't performed well. Like, if you know your team is better than what they've seen, then you have no reason. Just weather the storm, wait it out. And in that same league, I didn't think my team was going to be as good as it is, but it's undefeated. I have a lot of young talent. I started rebuilding year or two back. So, like Lamar Jackson, I've got the Njokus and Mark Andrews of the world. I mean, guys that have been blowing up, but will come back down to earth. I'm also being real about my team. Like, I've had, Mark Andrews. I'm like, yeah, I'm not trading him. I drafted him. I drafted him expecting to be a starter on my team for a long time to come. So you have to be smart with your team. Like, don't just sell because your team sucks for 2 weeks or is good for 2 weeks. Unless it makes sense, unless they weren't in your long-term plans, you just have to be careful. So, what do you think, Taylor?
Yeah, I think if I'm 2-0, we could again flip everything that we just said. Instead of selling those one guys, go get them. But something I like to do with a team that I think is competitive or has a chance to win it all is I have no problem mortgaging the future for a chance at a championship. So obviously picks are a way to do that. But another thing I like doing is taking some of those young guys that are performing that maybe they're in my starting lineup, maybe they're on my bench because I have a deeper team. Any of the guys we've talked about, the Marquise Browns, even if it's like you had like a Chris Carson that is producing decently well, would be a good starter for another team. If I could take some of those guys and package them together for studs and upgrade at any position. So like in one league, of course it's one before the season, I had a lot of assets that I felt like I wasn't going to be able to fit all of them into my starting lineup. I packaged first round picks, Miles Sanders, Kerryon Johnson, ended up getting Devontae Adams as part of the deal. And it was like I gave up some good players. Sanders could be great, don't know. Kerryon Johnson could be good if he gets all the touches he should get.
If he uses them.
Yeah, if they use them right. But then I don't have to worry about those things, and I can level up at my wide receiver position and get Devontae Adams. So looking at kind of packaging some of these guys, and you might have to – I had a conversation with somebody on our Facebook page about overpaying for studs. I don't know if there's such thing as overpaying. If there's some guy you want to go get him, and it may cost more than what someone else would be willing to pay. But go get your guys, and those studs are ultimately the guys that are most likely going to be leading you to championships, not a roster full of Marquise Browns that unexpectedly pop for 16
right,
weeks.
Like
so.
If you're the guy that has, and this is, this makes a good point. Aaron in the chat said, record doesn't matter, your total points are what's important. If you are a top 3 team in scoring but 0-2, you have to expect things will work themselves out. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that you have to be objective even with the points, and you really have to look at rosters. So for example, you may be up there because you just happen to have John Ross, DJ Shark, and Marquise Brown.
And Sammy Watkins week one.
Do we expect those guys to continue? And this goes even longer in the season, right? Like let's say AJ Green would miss 6 games. Is John Ross only putting up these points because AJ Green's out? When AJ Green comes back, does John Ross fall off? So to a certain extent, your points might not matter. If you're a guy that just happened to have Christian McCaffrey and Kamara, week 2 they combined for like 12.5 points. That's not indicative of how good your team is. So I think you got to really be objective and look at your roster, and is this guy getting points because somebody else is out that's going to come back? Or am I losing points right now just because Cam Newton is horrible and they know all they got to do is stop McCaffrey? Or because McCaffrey played on 4 days after getting 40 touches the week before? So I think it doesn't mean nothing, but you have to really look and figure out why people are doing what they're doing right now, and really be honest with, can they keep it up, or are they going to be this bad? Because we know Kamara and McCaffrey aren't going to be week 2 bad for the season, and we know that there's no way. Marquise Brown's efficiency is so high right now. It's like the best ever. There's no way that it's going to stay that way. Same thing with like Mark Andrews. He's got like the highest touchdown percentage through 2 games of any player ever. So what's affecting these players and why are they doing what they're doing? You got to kind of be honest about that too. Any thoughts, Brad?
Yep. No, I think I already said my piece on that. But Mark Andrews is the man, so don't you ever talk bad about him.
I'm just saying that the efficiency's just
no,
high.
it's true.
Not
Absolutely.
That he won't be good.
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to put up 100 yards every week and be a 1,600-yard tight end? I doubt it. Is he going to?
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Is he going to put up 16 touchdowns?
Let's hope so. No, I mean, everybody. So far, the first 2 weeks of the season have just been so weird. I mean, there's just been a lot of really odd things, and we're seeing that, with all the quarterback injuries. So you have to expect that things will settle out. I think it speaks more to this has been the first year where there's been so many guys that didn't play in the preseason that you're seeing fallout from that. It's taking a few weeks for everybody to kind of get back in rhythm, and it'll even itself out, and things will get back to a little bit more normal as we get to the midpoint of the season. But fear not, things will go better.
What are your thoughts, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. I think looking at what is sustainable and what's not is also helpful, as you mentioned, having those high scoring weeks as far as like the Kansas City pass catchers, whether it's Watkins or Hardman or Robinson this past week. Are those guys going to maintain what they're doing once Tyreek Hill comes back? We know what Tyreek has produced the last few years. We know Kelsey's going to be Kelsey. And just being realistic about this, what guys are going to be good high sell high guys on your team, and then which ones you think, maybe they don't keep up a historical pace like Mark Andrews, but which ones do you think are going to be, hey, he's going to be an asset, a cornerstone for dynasty tight ends for the for the foreseeable future. So just kind of making your best guess, because that's what we're all doing, is making our best guess, but is figuring out what's legit and what's probably just a flash in the pan.
If I have been right about anything since the day this started, it's that we don't know half of what we think we know. And if you thought you knew more than when I say that, if you read that and was like, dude, I know way more than half of what I think I know. If you still feel that way after the first 2 weeks of 2019, then I tip my cap to you, and because there's a lot of guys that I feel like every guy that I've talked crap about outside of Ronald Jones and Dante Moncrief have just completely blew up this year. And I'm going, oh no. Roto Heat is burning right now. the whole place is burning down.
But Dante Moncrief couldn't catch it.
Thankfully for him, I have a little bit of credibility. No, it's been a really weird year, and we've seen a lot of injuries already, especially two quarterbacks, which is weird, which ripples through the whole roster, right? As soon as Drew Brees goes out of that game, not that Teddy Bridgewater can't bring value to the assets on that team, but it's a lot harder when you go in unexpectedly. Now he'll have a week to work with everything, and they'll be able to build a game plan for him rather than for Brees, so that helps. But the same thing with Roethlisberger going out of his game, Foles, like the first play of the game, whatever it was. Like, there's been a lot of weird stuff that has happened so far, and you got to really look and be honest about your roster. Are these really good players, or did I just fall for the hype in the preseason? The Kalen Ballages, like, he's not good. He's about to get Drake's going to get traded, and Mark Walton's going to be the starter there within the next 3 weeks. Like, Ballage just isn't good. Did I fall for Moncrief, even though Rick told me not to? Did I not buy into, John Ross? There were people that were hyping him up. It's the Bengals. We've seen Tyler Boyd break out in his third year last year. There were people that talk about him. I didn't believe it, and I'm losing out right now. If you listen to the podcast from Sunday night, Brad, I ate crow on the podcast and said that I was wrong, and I think I missed one there in John Ross. And
hey, I don't know. I gotta say, I jumped on a pod late in the summer, and you guys were talking about stashes, and I popped in right when you said John Ross, and I typed in the chat and said his first 2 years have been historically awful. He has no chance of being productive. And you said, well, we're talking deep stashes here. So I know at one point you did say he would be a deep stash target.
Speaking of deep stash, Gardner Minshew.
I definitely, obviously the value of somebody goes into my valuation and my take. So when somebody goes from, John Ross being a first round rookie pick and being the number 9 overall in the NFL draft, I'm just like, whoa, that's way too much. Like, I'm not paying that premium for him. When he's almost free, it's a completely different story, because you can take that shot, and we saw that he, another guy that his touchdown efficiency is just through the roof. He had, I think he had 7 touchdowns last year with 21
Mhm.
receptions or something, like a 33% touchdown rate. Like, that's just nuts. So yeah, definitely value determines that a lot. I did promise the people in the chat that we would answer. There's a few questions I didn't want to ignore, but I told them at the end of the show we would cover a couple of those. Do we have anything else strategy wise that you guys will be using, this week, next week, depending on where you land? I know Brad might go to 3-0 and be like, "Oh shit, the building's burning down." But
I've only outscored my opponents by 100 each game.
yeah,
Well, all right. So you say that. So the league that Aaron and I are in, with the way we have it set up, week 2 and 3 and 13 and 14 are double header weeks. So I am currently 3-0 in that league. Most points each week. And I'm like guys are trying to talk trade, and I'm like, my team might not be that good. I don't know. It's entirely possible.
Brad's like, it's terrible. I've only got the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 and 3 running back, the number 1, 3, and 4 wide receiver, and the number 2 tight end. What am I ever gonna do? I gotta upgrade those so I have the top 3. Like, what the hell, bro? This guy's over here burning the house down over 1-1. But you gotta.
Well, the only additional strategy I was going to add was for when it comes to Dynasty 2 was over the next probably 1 to 3 weeks, choosing a direction and sticking to it. So if you go to 1 and 3 and you're like, all right, I got to blow this up and rebuild, and you make some win the next week and go to 2 and 3 and then decide, wait, I'm actually going to try to win it this year. That's going to really mess up your strategy for your team building. So
you're going to be going back and forth for 9 weeks.
Yeah. I don't know after 2 weeks if you have enough data now to make a decision, go for it. But over the next, have an idea of, am I going to be able to do it or not, and then make those decisions and stick with it. So
absolutely agree with that, Brad. Brad's just shaking his head, giving the thumbs up. Okay, so
challenge accepted. I'm going to try to do that every week.
Scott, let's see. Let's make sure I go back far enough. Hopefully, I know one guy said that he had to check out. Just nice back in one. John Ross or John Brown. I don't know if this is a start sit or if this is a dynasty play or a redraft play. So we'll just go in a vacuum. John Brown or John Ross, Brad? Just say a name, no explanation.
John Brown.
Taylor.
John.
There we go. Yeah,
I'm gonna go John Ross.
John Ross. I'm gonna go John Brown. I've been no explanation.
Yeah. What? How do you get an explanation?
I know. I stopped. I knew it wasn't fair, so I stopped, and I called myself out. Okay. Terry McLaurin, Vance McDonald, Dallas defense for Mark Andrews, Randall Cobb, Baltimore defense. I already have Pat's defense. Way too much defense in this trade, Scott. I'm assuming this is redraft, which is fine if you have defense in there. So I'm going to assume this is redraft, and if it's redraft, I am going.
What were the pieces without the defenses?
Terry McLaurin.
Whoa.
Terry McLaurin, Vance McDonald for Mark Andrews and Randall Cobb.
Yeah.
I'm going Mark Andrews' side.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the side I was going to take as well.
I think it's close, though, because I think that Rudolph could lean on Vance McDonald like he did in that game the other night. And Terry McLaurin's been doing pretty well, too. So I do think it's close, but I think I just take the positional advantage of Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Absolutely.
He said he would receive Andrews, so that would be good for him. I would do that. I like Mark Andrews. I know there was another question here. Rockout says my running back 1 is Zeke, and that is awesome for you. I wish I had Zeke in more spots than I do. Dude, there was another. I thought there was. Maybe I already answered that. Okay, we have. Is Chris Carson going to stay the starter with his fumbling issues in Seattle?
I mean, you saw this week Rashad Penny already getting more action, so he'll still be involved heavily because he's a good runner. I mean, I don't know that they really consider either of them truly the starter because they both get action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to be a draft capital slave, but I just can't get over the fact that they took Penny in the first round. I think Carson's isn't he undrafted? I believe. And so I think at some point, I don't think Carson ever becomes just completely irrelevant and not play because he has produced for him for a couple seasons now. I think if I think going forward they'll keep it more closer to 50-50 between Penny and Carson. It started to be a little heavier. I think week 1 Carson saw twice or 3 times as many touches as Penny did. So I think it'll probably even out a little bit more to 50-50. I wouldn't expect Carson to lose his job or anything like that because they're going to utilize both of them regardless.
I think it's 65-35 favor of Carson. I just think he's the much better running back, and he does fine in the passing game. Week 1, it was the Carson show. Pittsburgh's obviously got a little bit better run defense, so they did mix them in and out. But I think it's still Carson's show for now. And I think that Seattle probably wishes they didn't use that draft capital on Mr. Penny. Willis Byers says Mike Evans or Cooper. So just in the vacuum, Mike Evans or Cooper, Taylor?
I'm taking Evans probably for Dynasty. For redraft, I'm probably taking Cooper. Dak's, again, we're only 2 games in, but Dak's been super impressive thus far. I think the play calling from Kellen Moore has definitely helped revitalize that Dallas offense. I had some concerns about Cooper's foot injury coming into the season, but it doesn't seem to have hampered him too much yet. I'm not jumping off the Evans bandwagon. I still think he's better than Godwin, and I think Winston is holding Evans back a little bit with not being a great quarterback. So I'll waffle and say each, depending on dynasty or redraft.
I do want to say Joz Whedon over on YouTube. Carson was a 7th round pick. He was not undrafted, but it's pretty damn close. So thank you, Joz. Brad, Evans or Cooper? I don't know why we let Taylor give an explanation.
Well, today it'll be Mike Evans. Tomorrow it'll be Cooper. I'll switch back and forth each day. No, definitely Mike Evans. I mean, I like Amari Cooper. I don't trust Dak long term. Obviously he's looked good for 2 weeks, but it's Dak Prescott. I like Mike Evans just talent-wise. I mean, the dude's just a monster. So give me him.
I'm taking Evans everywhere. I love Cooper. I think Cooper's undervalued, especially in Dynasty. And I think we're really seeing his talent finally come out. Hopefully Dak can keep it up. But yeah, I'm taking Evans everywhere. I mean, I literally think that Evans is a top 4 wide receiver talent that is being hurt a little bit by quarterback play at the moment. But this is a dude that puts up 1,000 every year. He would have more touchdown upside if his quarterback didn't throw a ton of red zone interceptions. And, especially Dynasty long term, I want as much Mike Evans, and that's a guy that I'm probably going to be looking at here in the next couple weeks, trying to get him. So, and then PJ, what's up, buddy? Scott says he has another question over on YouTube. He says, another question, Baker or Brissett PPR league? Aaron Donald scares me for Baker, and Brissett has been equally or better than Baker. Not redraft, by the way. So this is a start-sit question for this week.
Yeah.
Are you starting Baker Mayfield? So that's the Rams. I haven't even really looked at matchups yet.
I think Indy's playing Atlanta. I think.
Well, then I go Brissett.
Well,
then.
I want to know. I got to pull up these matchups to give you my honest opinion.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
If the Rams are at home, I like Baker throwing a shit ton, even though he's on the road, because I'm going to assume, that the Rams are going to be ahead, and Baker's going to be playing catch up. The Colts.
No, The Browns are at
The
home.
Browns are at home.
Against. Yeah, it's Sunday night against the Rams.
Still, I mean, it's still probably going to be sure. Where are the Colts playing?
At home.
And they play
so the Colts will Falcons.
Whew.
I'm going Brissett. I mean, Indy plays pretty well at home, and the Falcons have been a little suspect all over the place. I mean, on the defensive side of the ball. So until Baker and the Cleveland Browns figure out what they're doing, and then losing a guy like David Njoku and not utilizing Landry very well and not giving Chubb the ball more, I mean, they seem like they're in kind of a weird place right now.
Taylor.
Yeah, I think I'm going Brissett this week as well, which feels weird because I'm a big Baker fan. But I mean, I hate this argument because you can't take away a play, but if you take away the 89-yard touchdown to Beckham, Mayfield's numbers were very pedestrian in week 2 and week 1. He wasn't great either. So he's gotten a little bit more. I don't know if rogue is the right word. He's forcing things a little bit more, trying to make the big play more often than he did last year, it seems like. I think Brissett's safer, and I also think it wouldn't be, not only does he have the higher floor, I think it wouldn't be unnecessarily unheard of for him to outscore Baker this week. So I'd take Brissett there.
I know I talk about this a lot, and especially with the Roto Heat team, we do the start-sit questions. So we have a video on YouTube that, you drop your questions on, and then we make another video after we have the whole team vote, so that there's a lot more input on the start-sits. But, I always say, like, I look at my roster, and I say, okay, do I need the upside this week versus my opponent's roster, or do I need the safe play? So like Taylor was saying, Brissett's probably the safe play, and there's no doubt that Baker's got the higher perceived ceiling. So that's how I would decide in this case. Like, do I need to just make sure I get enough points so that they don't hurt me, or do I really need to shoot for the moon because the roster I'm playing against is stacked? So that's how I would decide in this case, and I tend to lean Baker, just because they could shoot out, and both teams could shoot out though. But Atlanta's weakest, against running backs, and especially catching the ball out of the backfield, which the Colts aren't doing that much of that so far this year. So I don't know, man. It's definitely a tough one. That's where I would break it down. Like, when I don't have a clear decision, do I need the floor or do I need the ceiling? And then I would go Brissett if I need the floor, Baker if I need the ceiling. I sure wish Carolina had just sat Cam until he was ready. Almost looking like a lost season. I traded for him late last year. That's always tough. Carlise Lewis. I hope I'm saying your name right. Please don't be offended. Mack or Hardman? Are you talking start sit this week? Because I just talked about the Colts running backs against Atlanta. Atlanta's a team we target with running backs, so I'm going Mack all day in that situation personally. Taylor, what about you?
I'm trying to remember who Kansas City plays this week.
Does it matter?
Baltimore.
They're playing.
Not necessarily. Baltimore's got a pretty good defense, though. But they did just get shredded by Kyler Murray. But I guess I would take Marlon Mack there. I think he's pretty safe for 20 to 25 carries, depending on how that game's going. So I would take that because I think Hardman, that's going to be an offense that passes the ball a lot, especially if it's looking like Damian Williams and McCoy one or both of them might not play. Who knows? So they may be airing the ball out, but I think I'd take Mack there just because there are so many options there. You're kind of hoping that Hardman is the preferred option in that offense for 1 week, and Marlon Mack is the lead back there in Indy.
Marlon Mack's damn good too, Brad.
Yeah, I got to go Mack. You guys said it all.
Right. Scott, I do normally look at the entire roster and just not their quarterback, but I'm guessing if their quarterback is Mahomes, you might need the upside in your matchup, and I would probably lean Baker in that situation because if his quarterback's going to put up 36, you're probably going to need that ceiling play there. So that does change it a little bit, but if the rest of his roster sucks, then I'd probably still go Brissett. Okay, I'm checking Facebook to make sure we didn't have any last-minute questions here. PJ says, I'm sending Mike Evans, trying to get Fournette. What else would you want on top of Fournette?
Well, it would depend on the roster, but I would think you'd want a wide receiver as well. I mean, if you're losing a guy like Evans, you definitely got to have something to backfill there.
Yeah, I think if I could get some, if I'm trading away Mike Evans as my perceived wide receiver one on my team to get Fournette, I'm wanting at least a mid wide receiver two back. So if you could get like a Lockett, Metcalf, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, just guys in that range. Christian Kirk maybe on the lower end. I'd be wanting someone that I know that
Fournette and Cooper Kupp for Mike Evans.
I would say that's pretty fair.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Assuming redraft, yeah. I think if it's dynasty, I think a little harder about giving up Evans.
Dynasty, he wants to know about picks. If we're talking that, I would probably need a high first plus a back end first. I'm really like Mike Evans is a top 10 dynasty asset to me. So he's a guy and I do like Fournette. I'm higher on Fournette than most, but I would probably need at least a high first and a back end first on top of Fournette to move Evans.
Yep.
You guys agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah, I've got Evans as my sixth wide receiver in dynasty. Again, I'm high on Fournette. I think he's a workhorse. He's just kind of in a bad offense right now, which is hurting him a little bit. But he's getting touches. But just with that running back position in general, like, would you be shocked if the Jaguars have a bad season and end up with one of these like great 2020 backs next year and Fournette either moves on somewhere else or he just gets some of his carries eaten into next year? Like, from a dynasty perspective, thinking beyond this year, he worries me a little bit more than Evans. Like we've seen Evans produce the 1,000 yards and he's been the overall wide receiver one before. We haven't seen that upside from Fournette. So on top of, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Brad's typing's driving me bonkers. Sorry.
Click, click, clack.
Work never stops here.
Yeah, so I'm with you on that. On top of Fournette, I would need another like Cooper Kupp and a first would be like someone I could plug in right now and a first. Or if you're just getting picks, I would probably lean for two more firsts, like a 2020 and a 2021 or something.
All right, last question. Then we're calling it a night. What value does, I think he's saying Falk or Falls? It says Falls and Kyle Allen having Superflex in terms of picks in a rebuild. I think that if you're talking Falk and Allen, I think they're both like third rounders because they're not the starter if their quarterbacks are healthy, personally.
Yeah, and I think even with Kyle Allen there, he's got Will Grier, who was atrocious in the preseason, but he is somebody that they drafted, so that they liked something about him. So I think he's got to compete there. That, especially when you think about these backup quarterbacks, they might have a shorter leash than their starters had. So you pay something a second for Kyle Allen. He plays this week and Cam's injured. Maybe Cam's out for the rest of the year with a foot injury. And you start Kyle Allen this week, you've paid a second for him, and he doesn't play well, and so they start Grier next week, and the rest of the season you just paid for one game. So I wouldn't want to invest too much in them because they're like super short gap in my opinion.
I completely agree, 100%. Brad's on board. Okay, so first of all, YouTube brought it tonight, and I love it because YouTube sometimes is a little bit slower than Facebook because obviously we have the 1,300 people in our Dynasty group over on Facebook, so we normally get a lot of action over there, but it was kind of quiet tonight until right here at the end. So I want to thank YouTube for bringing it out tonight. Joz Whedon says that he loves what we're doing, covering the Dynasty perspective. That's where we started. That's where Roto Heat started, as Dynasty Red Zone, and then we converted over and added in DFS and redraft into the equation. So dynasties are our core. That's where we started, and we've just been adding on from there. So glad you love it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button over on YouTube and then hit that notification bell so that you know we go live every Wednesday, 9:30. I'm live Sunday mornings from 10 to 11 a.m., and then we move over to the VIP group. $2.99 a month on the website. You get our ADP data. You get in that group with private broadcasts in there, and then I'm trying to think of what else I'm missing. Brad, your rankings.
Yeah, we got rankings, we got statistics. I mean, we've got all sorts of stuff, and we're starting the IDP rankings, or the IDP ADP will start up because we're doing the mocks this week, starting this week. You also can be a part of the mock drafts if you become a VIP member, so you can actually help us tell the world what you think about fantasy football.
Let's make it clear. You don't have to do the mock drafts because you subscribe to the site. So let's make that clear.
We put you to work.
Or you do. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, join Discord if you're not already in there. Good conversations happening on. I mean, we've got the broken out by channels for those that aren't already in there. You have DFS questions, redraft, dynasty. So it's really organized. You got a lot of great feedback if you're looking for what consensus is from all the bright people that are part of the Roto Heat community. So
absolutely, I love Taylor jumping in there with the sales pitch when Brad fails.
Right.
Taylor picks it up and takes it home. Look at Brad, just like, I've never failed. I guess I'm 1-1.
I don't fail. I just succeed not as well as normal.
Geesh, over on YouTube, you showed up right at the end, but what was going on, and you can go back and watch this, was we talked about what we would do strategically, depending on where we are at in the record-wise of our fantasy league. So make sure you go back and watch that. Hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell over on YouTube. Guys, I appreciate you guys coming out. It was a lot of fun tonight. Here we go. They're asking how to join Discord. If you just go to rotoheat.com/Discord, you can get right in there. So, and rotoheat.com, we didn't even really mention rotoheat.com. That's the home of everything that we do. Taylor, Brad put out great articles. We've got Craig, Sully with Sully's 2 Cents podcast. And you can listen to this on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify,
Google Play. All that.
Yes, awesome.
Worldwide.
Find us on Facebook. All the links are on the website. That's the easiest part. You can see up at the top of the screen. And what?
I was eating some
Brad's over here eating W's.
Oh, Jesus, Jameis. He's fired. I'm getting a new quarterback for next week. Again, I appreciate everybody for coming out. You guys are awesome. We love you. And
welcome, Geesh. You just joined Discord.
We try to make this an hour, and we always go over. So we are not efficient, as Mr. Taylor would say.
We're entertaining.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Oh, Jesus.